Boy, oh boy, do I have some more terrible ideas to share with you today. This is Tantz, which is Yiddish for the word dance, and this is a really sad attempt at making a klezmer-inspired drum sequencer. But you don't have to just think of it as a drum sequencer. You could also use this to trigger notes and gates and all kinds of things. And what it has is it has a bunch of different preset rhythmic structures in it that are really common to klezmer music. Bulgars and horas and Turkishers and Arabers, and there's a 7/8 mode and all that. And for each drum, you have the ability to choose a bunch of different preset sequences that were created. I did these in tandem with my buddy David Rossman, who might be watching this. He's one of the players that I play klezmer with in town, and he helped me come up with some of the sequences for some of these drums. So just so you can see the level of neurosis that we went through for this is a spreadsheet that I made that transcribes a bunch of MIDI sequences that we made. So we had an Ableton session where we were like going through and creating all these different sequences and then transcribing them into a series of zeros and ones for the code. And this super nerdy spreadsheet I had spits out the exact copy and paste code that I needed for actually programming the module. So we have all these different pages in the spreadsheet for all the different things we were doing. And these are exactly what's inside the module. So, yeah, drums are not really a thing traditionally in klezmer music. Modern klezmer bands and just kind of like pan-Jewish music bands have drum set drummers, but traditionally, klezmer was really mostly played with string and brass and woodwind instruments, and at the most, you'd find in the shtetl maybe a guy with a small drum called a poik, which is like a little bass drum, and maybe a little cymbal. But drumming is very sparse. So again, just like my other video, take this with a giant grain of salt. We took some serious liberties here because there's not really a repertoire of actual, hard references for drum patterns in the same way that there might be for, African music. And people have gone through like great lengths with like Afro-Cuban music of like transcribing all these really complex rhythmic structures. And at the most you get with klezmer is just whatever people have kind of agreed on that are the actual grooves. So the things that are true is like the kind of core rhythmic structure of these things. But again, like, I don't even think it's necessary to have 6 voices. Like, that's already overkill. At the most, you really just need 1 or 2 rhythmic things to get the flavor of what the actual groove is. So I'll shut up now and start actually making music. So I have this huge patch, and here's like a groove called a Bulgar. So this is like a very common in a Freilach, it's called like a joyful dance. This is a very common rhythm you have with this type of accompaniment on a variety of instruments, but it's like the chuck for the so it's just these dorky sawtooth waves right now. So it's the upbeat, and then you have a bass line that goes like this that follows the kick and snare kind of pattern. It's like a 1 5 1 5 1 5 1. So you'll hear like basses playing this and trombones and tubas and stuff like that. And this is kind of like the core rhythmic structure of a Bulgar if you were to reduce it to like its most simple 8-bit kind of method. So, and then obviously this all follows melodies and changes and all that stuff, but this is the groove. So when you use Tantz in combination with the Kleztizer, you can set up a groove like this and kind of like make music by pushing different buttons for your rhythm section. So this is like, you could think of this as like a preset on an organ drum machine where it's like you push the klezmer button and this is your left hand and the drummer, kind of like those like Magic Genie organs, which is kind of funny. So like right now I have one of the sequences, this closed hi-hat. The other thing I want to say is these are labeled kick, snare, closed hat, open hat, perk 1, perk 2. I only named them like that because those are common things that people understand, but these are not the sounds you have to use for any of these, and they're honestly not even what those parts necessarily would play. Like, you could trade them for one another, so take that with a grain of salt also. But I have the closed hat pattern here triggering a random note thing that's going into Kleztizer too to create this weird kind of psycho doina thing. This is not... Klezmer music doesn't do this at all. This is just kind of me now going into the territory of making weird IDM that's inspired by Klezmer music. So this like pattern that I'm playing right now on a closed hat that would probably be played on like a wood block or something is triggering this weird note sequence. So yeah, for each channel of Tantz, you have these sequences. So the idea is that there's a style button that gives you the overall groove, and then for each channel there's variants on what that drum would be doing. So they're all dialed in and sequenced as if they were part of the groove and as if the drummer was doing kind of like 8 different variants. And the groove can quickly fall apart and not be a Bulgar anymore. Like if I start messing with the snare, for instance. That's still pretty Bulgari. But the open hat, for instance, the groove is going to start falling apart probably. Yeah, like that's not a traditional Bulgar rhythm at all. That is. Bum, 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 bum. Yeah, so there's all these different styles. I'm going to mute this for a second because it's all going to like really change the sound of everything, and I only set up the patch for this, but you have like Bulgars. This is a similar groove. I can actually turn this back on. So this is kind of like a halftime feel. Pretty sure David did this one, and yeah, he was doing it in like a halftime feel. So you could go back and forth between these two, which is cool. Then you have an Araber, which is inspired by Arabic music. And again, the other problem is that the tempos for all these grooves are going to be really different too. So you kind of have to know a little bit about the groove for it to make sense. But at the least, it's like if you turn the knobs all the way to the left, that's like kind of like the simplest version of the groove. So this is an Araber. This is a really common groove. Bum 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 bum. So I'll replace the bass line with that. I'll take the kick sequence and do the bass line with that. And take this thing out and plug this back in. Dun, 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 boom 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 boom. And then there's probably a more complex version of it. Yeah. Doom 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 boom 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 boom. Yeah. So that's pretty silly. And then there's 3/4 stuff in here, like horas and stuff like that, and jacques. And there's also a 7/8 mode, which is not common in Klezmer at all, really, but it is common in Balkan music and Romani music, which is kind of adjacent and kind of absorbed by the Klezmer world as well. So you can do that kind of stuff too. We should probably slow this down. Yeah. So yeah, the idea is that this is kind of a starting point, and again, like the goal here with all this stuff is not to make a one-to-one thing, like not making Klezmer music with a modular synthesizer, but taking things from Klezmer music and putting them in a modular synthesizer and then throwing a bunch of CV at them and making weird IDM. So I'll do that in a future video. That's Tantz. There's CV inputs for all the rhythms and mute switches. There's also swing and pulse width and CV over style, the rhythmic structure. The other thing too is instead of having a reset input, this has a reset output because there's different time signatures for each of these. So you would plug the reset output into other sequencers so that they snap and are in the same time signature. So yeah, that's Tantz. Thanks for watching.